meeting number 4 of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon for some people and good morning for some people, those who are joining us from the West Coast. First, I would like to read a health and safety notice, a reminder to all attendees in the room to physically distance themselves from others by at least 2 meters and to wear a mask unless you are seated and you are more than 2 meters from anyone else. This is a hybrid meeting. Some members are appearing in person in the parliamentary present and the other members are appearing remotely. Reminder to all members, please speak at a pace slow enough for interpretation to keep up. The clerk will be tracking raised hands and keeping a list. For the chair, all questions should be decided by a recorded vote, except for those decided unanimously or on division. This is based on the order adopted by the House on September 23rd. The meeting is being webcast and is available on PalView. I would like to, before we go into the scheduling issues for today, I would like to read a clarification in regards to the in-camera proceeding meetings we had for the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify certain elements related to in-camera proceedings. Members of the committee asked if the meetings of the subcommittee on agenda and procedure are held in public by virtue of the motion the main committee adopted regarding in-camera proceedings. For the benefit of members of the committee, the motion reads as follows: that any motion to go in camera be debatable and amendable, and that the committee may only meet in camera for the following purposes: to consider a draft report, to attend briefings concerning national security, to consider lists of witnesses, and for any other reason with the unanimous consent of the committee, and that all votes taken in camera, with the exception of votes regarding the consideration of draft reports, be recorded in the minutes of the proceedings, including how each member voted when the recorded votes are requested. By agreeing to this motion, the main committee has decided to govern its in-camera proceedings in a particular manner. However, its application to a subcommittee remains another matter. House of Common Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, at page 974 states, once established, subcommittees carry out their own work within the mandate entrusted to them. They are free to adopt rules to govern their activities, provided these are consistent with the framework established by the main committee. Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure are established primarily to relieve the main committee of the planning and administrative tasks. I wish to draw the attention of the committee members to page 1088 of House of Common Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, which states that subcommittees on agenda and procedures usually meet in camera. Subcommittees meet to plan the work of the main committee in a more informal and collegial manner. Based on the motion establishing it, a subcommittee can conduct its business as it seems fit, so it can exercise its mandate efficiently and report a work plan back to the main committee for consideration. For these reasons, there is a long set of precedent for holding subcommittee meetings in camera as such. The chair can use her discretion in determining whether subcommittee meetings commence in camera or in public. Thank you. So this is just a little clarification which I wanted to provide. And today, we had to do some juggling of the schedule to accommodate the votes scheduled for 2 p.m. today, with bells starting at 1:30 p.m. So I'm hoping for your understanding and flexibility. So it was my judgment that we did not have time to proceed with the first panel before the vote, as there are witnesses with important testimony that deserve a full opportunity for uninterrupted questioning by the committee. So we will schedule this panel, and I will return to that in a bit once we go into the details. We will suspend this meeting at the bells and return after the vote for the originally scheduled second panel of witnesses for 1 hour at approximately 3 p.m. Going forward, the committee will be meeting from 3:30 to 5:30. The agreement has happened between the whips, and the CIMM committee meetings will be happening on Monday and Wednesdays from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. while the House is in session. So this will be in effect as of Monday, November 16th. The clerk circulated that also to all the committee members, but I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. Next week, the committee can meet from 1 to 3 p.m. on Friday, November 13th, if it wishes, and I sent out an email to the members of the subcommittee to let me know if that is the desire. Initially, we were looking into see if the minister can come on that. The minister is not available on November 13th. And so it would be, if we go and decide that there will be a meeting on November 13, it would be a meeting continuing our study on the impact of COVID-19 on immigration. We could choose to invite back today's first panel to come next Friday, November 13, or we can invite them during a regular Monday, Wednesday meeting. It is the will of the committee to meet next week. So I would like to have members' input. If majority of you or all of you agree to hold the meeting on November 13th to listen from witnesses. I see a hand raised, Mr. Daliwal.
Yes, Madam Chair, I think it's a good idea, and because there will be votes probably coming weeks as well, because the way it is scheduled now from 3:30 to 5:30. So it's a good idea to have a meeting next Friday. When we were traveling on special meetings like this, in previous Parliament, even when we were sitting in the House in the International Trade Committee, we had agreements that particular meetings that were brought forward, there were no motions brought forward, and as long as it's a productive meeting to bring in the witnesses only, I'm all for it.
I see Mr. Allison has raised hand. Mr. Allison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So listen, I'm never in favor of meeting during a break week, and I certainly would have made the exception if the minister was able to meet it, especially on a Friday. This is the worst time you can actually meet. It was the only time we were given this week, so we took what we could get. But going forward, as we move to Mondays and Wednesdays, that makes some sense. If we need to put in an extra meeting or go it a little bit extra longer, I don't have a problem with that. Today may be a bit of a challenge, just because I know people have schedules. But I will defer to the committee. I think that it's kind of tough. I also think it'd be nice to have the two panels together. So, another day needs to happen anyway. So my thought is to try and keep those together. So once again, if there was going to be a minister here next week, I would certainly make the commitment on a Friday, but Friday's a tough day, especially on a break week. No ministers here. I'm personally not all that enthusiastic about trying to meet on a break week on a Friday afternoon with no minister. Thanks.
Ms. Dencho.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to build on some of the comments from my colleague, so I guess we're talking about two scheduling issues today. I know the extension of an hour is conflicting with quite a few of our schedules. So I would appreciate if we could have the fulsome panel we plan to today, and I'm happy to meet an additional day or tack on an extra couple hours to another committee meeting, but it's just quite disruptive today, and particularly with the short notice. So that's one thing. And then next week, I know members of the committee were keen to meet with the minister, but since he's not available, it is a constituency week. There's a number of constituency things we have planned in our communities. So it's one thing to cancel them for a minister who's difficult to get to the committee, but it's another thing to continue on the study when we have obligations to our constituencies. So I would just ask that we consider postponing the meeting or not having that meeting on Friday unless the minister is able to attend. Thank you.
Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I guess vote disruptions is going to happen quite regularly. And what I'm worried about is that we will keep on losing time with our committee schedule days we have a variety of work that we need to get on with, and so I am inclined to proceed today, if it's at all possible, to make sure that we don't lose both panels. At least we get one panel in. I do have constituency calls and Zoom meetings lined up, but if we proceed that way, I'm going to get my staff to reschedule those to accommodate the work of the committee. And then second to that, with respect to Friday, I'm, it's not ideal. Like everyone else, constituency weeks are precious time. But again, I also recognize too the work that we have in front of us with this committee. We have this study. There are many other studies that I certainly would wish to move on with. And so I will also accommodate the Friday if the committee is going to proceed.
Okay, well, we'll hear from other people also, and then we can come to a conclusion. We have Mr. Surrey next. Mr. Surrey.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
For the opportunity. Yes, I'd like to. Me too. I have constituents appointments after this afternoon. So my preference, as honorable members Dancho and mentioned too earlier, I would prefer to put the two panels that we had today, reschedule them for November 16th together. And because we don't have the minister next Friday, not have the meeting on November 13th. That would be, I agree with the two other comments made earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Surrey. Next we have on the list Ms. Martinez Parada.
Oui, merci, Madame.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, listen, on the one hand, I understand that we're all in our ridings during next week's break week. However, I think it's interesting that it's because we can't welcome the minister that we're not meeting Friday. I think, well, the witnesses are just as important as hearing from the minister, and we need to hear from them. But I understand that if everyone wants to have a break week next week, well, then I don't have a huge problem supporting that. That being said, I would be interested in at least agreeing on 1 hour today. I just want to understand whether everyone agrees that we should have at least 1 hour of testimony today, and that we can quickly reinvite the witnesses as soon as we can set dates for the committee.
Thank you. We have Ms. Normandine next.
Merci. Thank you. Since everyone weighed in, I will do so as well. I have already organized for today and next Friday to be available if we were going to sit in committee. I understand the concerns of everyone, but I also have the fear that we're not making enough progress on this study, but also on the others that are coming, particularly the file of workers that will become increasingly relevant as the crisis advances. But I am available, but I will bend to the committee's will.
Anyone else wants to proceed further? Okay, so I would like to go by support of the majority of the members and see. I think we have rescheduled the second panel for today, which is scheduled from 3 to 4, and we have the room available. The clerk has arranged that. So, and we have already, the witnesses were notified that the change is happening because of the vote. So, and hearing to the members, I think I would like that we proceed with the second panel. So I would request the members if you can make some arrangements today. I know Fridays are meant for our constituency, but this is also important work we have to do. So that if we can proceed with the second panel and hearing from members about November 13th, I think we can leave it and we don't schedule the meeting based on members' will that they want to have some conflicts with within the work they have in the constituency. So would that be okay with everyone? that if we go ahead with today's second panel, we will reschedule the first panel. I will discuss it with the clerk and see when we can invite the panel on the colleges and universities. But to proceed today after the votes and not to have a meeting on November 13th. Would is it the will of the committee? Okay, I see some heads nodding, so I would assume that we will. So, Mr. Clerk, we will go ahead with the second panel. We will meet around 3 p.m. I hope the votes would be done by that time. So we will meet for the second panel, and we will then not have a meeting on November 13th, and then we will reschedule our calendar. So I understand that the minister is available to appear November 25th for 1 hour, followed by 1 hour with the officials. Can I have a motion to invite the minister and the officials to appear on the main?
So moved.
Sorry, Madam Chair, somehow maybe it's just me.
Strange, I could hear, but
can
others
you hear
couldn't.
me? Okay, so I will repeat what I said. I understand that the minister is available to appear before the committee on November 25th for 1 hour, followed by 1 hour with the officials. So can I have a motion to invite the minister and officials to appear on the main estimates and the supplementary estimates?
Madam Chair, I bring the motion forward to bring the minister and the officials on November the 25th for 2 hours.
Mr. Dhaliwal has moved that we invite the minister on November 25th for 1 hour and officials followed by the in the second hour. So do I have the will of the committee? Do I have the unanimous support on that? Okay, so moved. We will invite the minister to appear before the committee for November 25th. For the information of the members, the minister is also available to appear before the committee on December 2nd for 1 hour on the motion which has been moved by the committee, motion of Ms. Kwan. So we will schedule that meeting on that.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Just, Madam Chair, just on a clarification on
Yes,
that.
Ms. Kwan.
Thank you. Will officials also be coming for 1 hour after?
Yes, so that's one meeting. We will schedule 1 hour for the minister's appearance and followed by 1 hour of the officials.
Fantastic.
So that
Thank
will
you.
be for December 2nd.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Surrey.
Yeah, that's good. But are you aware of any other ministers coming 3 times to committee in the last few months? That's really good.
I have not checked on that. I can check. So this is 2 times. Yeah.
Madam Chair, maybe Dean could bake a cookie or 2 for him. That'd be great. I know it was appreciated.
Oh. So.
It'll be a burger. It'll be a burger, Jeff. Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Ellison.
So I just wanted to go back to Mrs. Farrar's point. It's a terrible time slot, 3:30 to 5:30, given the fact that a lot of votes have been happening at 3 o'clock. So I would just, we may need to adjust our schedules accordingly and plan to go to 6:30. It may end up being 4:30 to 6:30. So I realize the committees get in the habit of blocking times, but she's got a bang on point. We're going to have a lot of votes, and they seem to be at 3 o'clock. So I say that as a caution for us as members to plan accordingly. And also, if you can get ahead of it, Madam Chair, to figure out that witnesses may need to be bumped, and we'll have to adjust our schedules accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. This is the agreement which I think all the whips have arrived at because of based on the availability of the rooms and the keeping in mind the time difference in different provinces. So the slot which the CIMM has been given is for 3:30 to 5:30 Monday and Wednesday. And I know based on my personal experience in the 5 years, votes can happen, and especially as we are coming towards where we rise for the winter break. I don't know that, like, we will see as we go how we can do, because extending the meeting also depends upon the availability of the rooms. And because of this pandemic, the staff needs extra time to clean the rooms. They need at least 1 hour before they can have another meeting. So that we will keep in mind, and we will go as the every week and go by the day. So if is there anything else anyone wants to add or anything? Just I will sum up the discussion which we had. We don't have unanimous consent to proceed with the meeting on November 13th, so we will not have that. We will schedule our meetings as of November 16th, and today we will not have the first panel, but we will have the second panel, and the room is available from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. And we will reschedule the first panel. And the minister will be appearing before the committee for the main estimates and the sum estimates on November 25th. So if there is no business, we will suspend and resume following the completion of the vote. So I'll
bring in the motion to adjourn.
We are suspending the meeting until the completion of the votes.
Madam Chair, before we suspend,
yes, Ms. Kwan.
Is the link to check back into this committee and the password the same, or will we get a new link?
I will ask the clerk to please clarify, Mr. Clerk.
The link that you have should allow you to re-access the Zoom call after you leave it. Same link, same password.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And I suspend the meeting, and we will meet at 3 p.m. after the completion of the vote. Thank you. number 4 of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration to order. First of all, I want to thank the witnesses who are appearing before the committee today as we do our important study on the impact of COVID-19 on the immigration system. And on behalf of the committee members, I just want to apologize to our witnesses for the scheduling issues because of the vote. We had to schedule from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So thanks for understanding and thanks for being flexible. So I welcome our 3 witnesses who are appearing as before today before the committee. So the first one is Mr. Raj Sharma, the managing partner for Stewart Sharma Harsiani. And our second witness is, as an individual, Lon Waltman, lawyer, Waltman and Association. And we also have Association Québécoise des Avocats et Droit de Immigration. Sorry for my pronunciation. They are being represented by Mr. Cliché Levard, the president, and Ms. Wallois, the administrator. So I welcome all the witnesses. All the witnesses will be given 5 minutes for their opening remarks, and then we will move to the round of questioning. So with that, I would request our first witness, Mr. Sharma, to please start. Mr. Sharma, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. It's my pleasure to appear before this committee again and speak to you regarding the impact of COVID-19 on our immigration system. COVID-19 was an unprecedented disruption to our immigration system. This was something completely new, completely unexpected, and it impacted almost every line of business at IRCC. IRCC was caught flat-footed, as were we all. Hundreds, if not thousands, of immigration and visa officers had to stop working or start working remotely. Visitor visa applications, biometrics, medical examinations, all essentially eliminated for weeks and months. Visa application centers were shut down. Families have been separated, whether by borders or travel logistics or other conditions in other countries. Citizenship ceremonies and landings for permanent residents were put off. Language schools and other designated learning institutions are on tenterhooks. Thousands of international students are still trying to navigate this new landscape. There are significant delays in processing submitted applications, including those submitted electronically for individuals within Canada. They are in limbo, and as one example of impact, this is affecting their eligibility for health coverage, even though they have what's called implied status in Canada. There was and continues to be a massive uncertainty as immigration policy is being made almost daily via website. There are promising signs on the horizon, however. COVID-19 has led to changes in the way we hear cases. The Immigration Refugee Board is Canada's largest administrative tribunal, and it has a tradition of innovation and evolution. At the beginning of this pandemic, eligibility determinations, refugee hearings, and appeals were canceled and delayed. This included sponsorship appeals, which added to the grief and anxiety of those affected by the pandemic. However, hearings have resumed with health and safety protocols at the Refugee Protection Division, and most appeals at the Immigration Appeal Division will be done remotely. All divisions of the Immigration and Refugee Board will need continued support. Eliminating in-person attendance could lead to a cascade of savings and increase access to justice. COVID-19 has demonstrated the importance of frontline workers. During this pandemic, we continue to exploit and put migrant agricultural workers and new immigrants in harm's way. Persons of color and new immigrants are disproportionately affected by COVID-19 because they're also disproportionately on the front line as healthcare workers and essential workers, transit, meat, agricultural processing. These workers are not disposable. There should be greater employment mobility and a clear pathway to permanent residency for all essential and frontline workers, irrespective of whether they're in a so-called low-skilled job. This change can be made easily through expanding the existing express entry system. COVID-19 taught us the importance of family reunification. The family class for parents and grandparents was slated to open in April, and it was delayed. We were looking forward to this newest iteration of the program. It was unfortunately a little disappointing. It's a simple lottery draw, and one simple change could improve the program. Last month, I was on a CBC call-in show, and Fraser, a big game hunter from Lac La Biche, called in. He wasn't affected by the program, but he called in to tell us that if you're unsuccessful for a big game hunting license or a tag, in a given year, you could build priority points so that when you try again, you have a higher chance of being picked. This is someone who just listened in for 5 or 10 minutes, but was able to identify a solution, the weighted draw. A weighted draw should merit serious consideration for the next iteration of the parents-grandparents family class. Further, if we do want increased numbers, then we should consider increasing the age limit of accompanying dependents, which at present is set at a hard 22. Crises not only reveal existing shortcomings, but they can be opportunities as well to accelerate change already in progress. IRCC has made great strides with electronic applications, and this should continue. Wet signatures and paper applications should not be required in 2020 and beyond. Hopefully, there'll be a silver lining to this pandemic that's wreaked so much devastation around the world in the form of further common sense and logical enhancements to immigration processing. Thank you for this work. I think that there's great value in continued consultations with stakeholders. We can work together to increase value and decrease cost and identify and resolve inefficiencies. Thank you. I look forward to answering any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Now we will move to our next witness, Mr. Waldman. Mr. Waldman, welcome, and the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Mr. Waldman.
Thank you. Honorable committee members, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to appear before the committee. The COVID pandemic has had a dramatic impact on all aspects of the immigration program delivery and on the clients who the program serves. Foreign nationals in Canada are often facing lengthy delays and separations from their family members. Canadian citizens who are in relationships with foreign nationals find themselves separated from their partners at a time when they need their emotional support. IRCC must protect the safety of its employees and of Canadians by ensuring that the people who enter Canada do not pose a risk of bringing COVID into the country, but they must at the same time take into account the emotional needs of the Canadian citizens and foreign nationals who are in the country. With this in mind, I have a few suggestions. First, IRCC should facilitate the reunification of partners and spouses of Canadian citizens and permanent residents who are being separated as a result of COVID. The pandemic has dramatically increased the processing time for spousal sponsorships because immigration offices overseas are either closed or working at limited capacity. I'm aware that IRC recently sent out instructions to visa officers to take into account dual intent, that you could be applying for a visa to come and visit your spouse and at the same time being sponsored by your spouse. But this doesn't go far enough in my view, because it still leaves a lot of discretion in the hands of visa officers to refuse visas and possibilities of coming to Canada of spouses who are being separated. Visa officers should be instructed to issue visas to spouses or partners of Canadian citizens or permanent residents who are seeking to be reunited with their spouses in Canada, unless there are concerns that the person applying might be inadmissible. IRCC has recognized that although Canada needs to ensure that it has sufficient immigrants to foster economic growth and has set an ambitious quota for 2021, it will be extremely difficult for Canada to admit a large number of immigrants from outside of Canada due to the difficulties associated with processing applications during COVID. Minister Mendocino has indicated he would consider programs to facilitate immigration for people already in Canada. I urge the committee to encourage the minister to aggressively consider this option. There are many non-immigrants in Canada who have the skills to be able to contribute to the economy, and indeed many of them are already contributing. We should welcome these people who are contributing, regardless of their immigration status. I am well aware that officials in the past have resisted any kind of program that would allow for adjustment of status of asylum seekers or people without status. But given the current situation, given the contribution that foreign nationals are making now as many frontline workers, it is in the best interest of Canada and would be a humane response to give a pathway to permanent resident to people already in Canada who have shown that they are able to successfully establish themselves, regardless of their status. Third, I urge the committee to encourage IRCC and CBSA, and I'm picking up on something that the previous speaker said, to enter the 21st century by further digitalizing the application process. COVID has forced us all to change how we operate. Until COVID, I filed paper copies of all records in the federal court and submitted many of my applications to IRCC by paper processing. COVID has forced us all to adapt. I now do all possible filing electronically. To its credit, IRCC has been innovative in how it's responded to COVID, but much more can be done to digitalize the immigration process. Some of the changes forced on us by COVID have been positive, but there's still too many applications that IRC requires us to file through paper application. IRCC must be encouraged to expand digitalization to ensure that the application process can be more efficient. I look forward to answering any further questions you might have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Wallman. We will now go to Mr. Clichet-Levard. Mr. Clichet-Levard, will you be sharing your time with Ms. Veloz? Okay, so you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and you will be sharing your time with Ms. Veloz.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the committee for this invitation to appear, and we hope that it will be a collaboration that will continue in the future. Our association is a grouping of nearly 400 lawyers practicing in all spheres of immigration law, both in refugee protection, economic immigration, family immigration since 1991, nearly 30 years. We have intervened at a number of parliamentary committees, but also before the Superior Court of Quebec, the Federal Court, and the Supreme Court of Canada. We are at the heart of all debates on immigration, and our positions are constantly solicited by the media. Today, as president of the association, accompanied by our vice president, I thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today. I will speak first of all about the issues concerning visas, particularly in Francophone Africa. I would like to raise before the committee the serious gaps concerning the approvals of temporary visas and work permits or visitor visas affecting Francophone Africa, particularly the Maghreb. In 2019, their access to information requests confirmed that requests from Algeria, for example, are refused for 77% of applicants, while 93% of requests made by French citizens are accepted. For India, it's 30% of refusal, 15% only for China, while during this time, Morocco hit 44% for refusals, Senegal 75% refusals, Chad 86% of refusals for study permits, and so on and so forth. So obviously, as you know, a great number of these students are destined for Quebec. They must first obtain a certificate of acceptance from Quebec. So this is done, immigration authorities from Quebec and have chosen to accept these future students in Quebec. In 100% of cases, they were chosen by Quebec, but then they are rejected in great numbers by Immigration Canada and foreign embassies for their work, for their study permits. In March, we learned that barely 10% of study permit applicants who are destined for Quebec, when Quebec represents 25% of Canada's population. That is why we are calling for change to remedy this situation as quickly as possible, so that Quebec receive its fair share of immigrant students. And I'll give the floor to my colleague now.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It happens all the time. Donc, pour ma part, j'aimerais.
I would like to draw the committee's attention to issues experienced in family reunification, which is yet the cornerstone of the immigration system in Canada. Family grouping has a number of components, whether it's a Canadian or a permanent resident who sponsors their applicant. But don't forget that there are refugees or humanitarian applicants who make reunification requests. Unfortunately, we are facing serious issues in a number of these categories. These issues were unfortunately exacerbated by COVID. All persons who wish to be reunited with their close loved ones, we talk about children and spouses, can wait years before a decision, and this in an opaque, difficult to follow process. Family separation is particularly difficult and has significant consequences in Canada. For example, a asylum seeker can easily wait 2 years before receiving a decision, and they may also. Some other applications can take 2 years. You can imagine being separated from your wife and children for all those years. During that time, it is impossible for members of the family to come to Canada with any type of visa because these demands are systematically rejected despite the recognized notion of double intention in the Act. We feel that the government has the ability to make the process more humane and to accelerate it and to
Time is up. Maybe you will get an opportunity to talk about during the round of questioning. And if any of the witnesses were not able to complete their testimony and they want to submit something, you can send in a written submission also to the committee and we will take into consideration. So with this, I thank all the witnesses for their opening remarks. And we will now move to the first round of questioning, and which will be of 6 minutes each. I will move to Mr. Hallen. Mr. Hallen, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You can start.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming today and sharing your thoughts and experiences. I wanted to touch on some points that some of the speakers had highlighted. We know that this pandemic has brought many things to light. I was always taught that work is work. Work carries a lot of dignity and honor, and we should recognize people's work as such. Now, whether work is defined as skilled or not, we've seen through this pandemic that industries such as some of the ones that were listed were transport, caregiving, manufacturing, processing, and we know they carry so much importance, which have sometimes they haven't given the respect that they deserved previously before the pandemic. We learned that not only is this work important and considered frontline, like some mentioned, but it's also essential and saves lives. These frontline workers are often temporary foreign workers. There doesn't seem to be a proper pathway for them, though, currently. These frontline workers are good enough to be our neighbors and provide essential services, but when it comes to many of the challenges around obtaining a PR, there are so many obstacles for them.
Mr. Hallen, sorry for interrupting. Can you move your microphone a bit away from your mouth? I think there is some buffer. The interpreters are having an issue.
Is this better?
Yes. Thank you.
So I'd like to ask my question to Mr. Sharma, who, by the way, I'd like to mention, it's a great looking poster in the background. Given some of these challenges, in your own experience, what are some of these challenges these frontline workers are going through in obtaining the PR status?
Thank you, sir. In terms of permanent residency, the challenge for permanent residency is that the express entry or the federal immigration system prioritizes the economic class, and the economic class is restricted more or less to the high skill, so-called high skill. And here I just want to point out that, high skill, low skill, I think the reality is it's more like low wage, high wage. I think that's the actual discrepancy here. But the federal system is restricted to so-called high skilled individuals, NOC A, National Occupation Classification NOC 0AB. A lot of these essential workers are in this no man's land of NOC C and D. So you have transport drivers, for example, very, very essential for logistics and our supply chain. And other than some select provincial nominee programs do not have access to a ready pathway for permanent residency. So again, my concern is that we're treating these very, very essential workers, and I completely agree with you in terms of the inherent dignity of work. We're treating these individuals like disposable workers, something similar to some of the Gulf states, which is that you're good enough to come here, you're good enough to work here, contribute to programs that you might not even have access to, such as EI or CPP. And then at the end of your work or whenever we're finished, just go back home. So I think that COVID-19 has exposed a moral obligation and responsibility to whoever's taking care of us, we should also take care of them. So I am proposing expanding the express entry to look at the NOC codes that these frontline essential care essential workers are utilizing and allowing them a pathway to permanent residency.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sharma. Actually, that covered my second question about what kind of pathway do you see theoretically for them to obtain that status? Is there anything you want to add to that at all, like for a pathway?
Sir, in the past, pre-2012, there was a sort of pass-fail Canadian experience class, again, restricted to skilled occupations, but the current system could easily be modified. I don't think that there's, obviously this committee has, we can't tell the provinces what to do, and different provinces will prioritize what they think is important, but I think that it's a ready solution to use the existing express entry pathway, utilize those NOC codes, and take care of those individuals that have been taking care of us.
Thank you for that. So I want to also, Mr. Sharma, talk about, recently we heard the Liberal government announce bringing in about 1.2 million immigrants over the next 3 years. Given that we already have so many international students and temporary foreign workers that already are here, instead of this government trying to hit, let's say, unrealistic quotas, doesn't it make more sense for us that we go to the lower hanging fruit, such as international students or temporary foreign workers, which we've seen are so essential, and make the pathway easier for them to obtain a PR status? Like the processing is already halfway there, and like given that there's so many closures of offices around the world, would this not be a lower hanging fruit to go after?
I would agree. I think it's you have hundreds of thousands of individuals in Canada as temporary foreign workers, irrespective of their NOC codes or skill or low skill. And you also have, of course, hundreds of thousands of international students. They are indeed low-hanging fruit. So that would seem to be where we should put our attention to. However, the system that is set up right now makes it very difficult for even a graduate of a 2-year program in Canada, let's say someone who's 22, 23 years old, graduate of a 2-year program in Canada, even with 1 year skilled work experience in Canada with good English, that person will never hit the points required for selection under express entry. For example, the last draw just a couple of days ago was in the 470s. That will take out the vast majority of international graduates with a 2-year
Sorry for interrupting,
diploma.
Mr. Sharma. The time is up. We will have to move to the next person. So we have Mr. Saray. Mr. Saray, you have 6 minutes for your round of questioning.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, 6 minutes goes by quickly. I would like to thank the 4 witnesses for joining us today, for your balanced approach that looks at health and emotion and reunification of families. Thank you very much for your balanced approach. I think that I really liked your testimony. My first question is to all of the witnesses, but I'll start with Mr. Waldman.
About spousal reunification program, and as you know, I'm sure last week we made some changes to the directives, given the decision making officers the consideration on dual intent for spousal sponsorship applications. So do you interpret this as a step in the right direction? What more can we do? Mr. Waldman and then Mr. Sharma.
Yeah, I read the direction, and obviously it's certainly a step in the right direction, because Otherwise, many visa officers would refuse an application by a spouse outside of Canada, come to Canada saying, no, you're coming as an immigrant, you should do a sponsorship and you won't get the visitor visa. So by affirming the notion that there is dual intent, it's a step in the right direction. But unfortunately, I think there's still a significant risk that in a lot of cases, people will still be refused because it still leaves the visa officer with the discretion to say, well, I know there's dual intent, but I'm sure you're going to apply for that permanent residence when you get there, and I'm not going to give you the visa. Now, that might be okay if processing were 6 months or 8 months, but now because of COVID, processing is doubling or tripling. So I think in those circumstances, the minister has to send a much clearer directive to visa officers. We don't want spouses to be separated for years. It's not acceptable. We need to make sure that they get together quickly, and if they can't be processed outside, we'll let them come and be processed inside, unless there are admissibility concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Waldman. Mr. Sherman, do you have anything to add?
I welcome the changes to Regulation 179B. It's interesting. This is kind of like what's old is new again. So many, many years ago, before IRPA, there was something called a fiancé visa. And so individuals were able to get engaged and then come to Canada. And perhaps there was some abuse there. And so there was a change there. And so I will have to, it's definitely a positive. And I used to be an officer many, many years ago. It's very, very difficult. The minister is going to put in their regulations. They can have their sort of manuals. It's very difficult to curb officer discretion. So I think perhaps it's a bit of a wait and see, but it's a very, very positive step. Now, the only issue is that if it gets refused, what do we do? All we can do is go to the federal court, which is kind of like using a hammer to kill a mosquito. So I do agree with Mr. Waldman. It's a very, very positive step. Hopefully there'll be some manuals that follow that give officers some more guidance so that we can be assured that these applications are properly and substantively considered.
Thank you, Maître Valois et Maître Cliché-Rivard.
Mr. Cliché-Rivard and Madame Valois, do you have anything to add? Well, quickly, we also are happy about this initiative. However, the problem will remain unchanged when we look at the measures that applicants have to submit in their country of origin. If they want to come to Canada, we understand that the request for a residence was already approved at the first step, and there's already an application that was applied a little while ago. You might think that this person might not have a lot of plans in their country of origin and is not taking on a 3-year study plan, but is perhaps studying French or English. So if that could be considered for a sponsorship applicant, but it might be perceived negatively by a visa processing officer. So I agree with Mr. Waldman that there needs to be a presumption of giving the visas. Excellent. Thank you very much. I have 1.5 minutes left.
About the modernization, the digitalization. When we look at biometrics and the department has, especially with COVID now, realized the importance of this, but it's been an issue over the last 20 years. And so I wanted to ask you, because you touched upon this a bit in about a minute or less here, what more can we be doing for IRC to more digitize and modernize the system? You're on mute.
Mr. Sharma, you are on mute.
There's been great
50
strides.
seconds left.
There's been great strides by IRCC to digitize. So APR, application for permanent residence, express entry, is already electronic. As Mr. Waldman said, there's many applications that are not. So we've already moved the TRVs, the temporary resident visas, online as well. We've moved most APRs online as well. Spousal sponsorships are still paper applications. Humanitarian and compassion applications are still paper applications. So there is probably a good 20-25% more that can be done here. But we've made good progress, I think, on digitization.
10 seconds, Mr. Sorry.
I want to thank the witnesses for your balanced approach and continue to your offer to be working with the federal government to improve this. This is non-party lines. We have to do better because this is the best country in the world. So thank you so much for
Thank you, Mr.
your
Saray. Your
testimony.
time is
Merci.
up. Now we will move on to Ms. Normandin. Ms. Normandin, you have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses. From what I'm hearing, I think that your ideas are giving us lots of good food for thought for the future. I will address my question to Mr. Clich-Rivard and Madame Valois. I would like to know the main reasons mentioned when a visitor visa is refused. Thank you for the question. First of all, it's very often a matter of ties to the country of origin and previous voyage travel history. The immigration officer is of the opinion that they haven't demonstrated that they have a reason to return to their country of origin, and that's because of family ties in the country of origin, job perspectives, and other economic factors in the country of origin. It's essentially that, and we're told that the person will not return based on their judgment. When we say that the person won't return after the end of their visa period, in your opinion, are the refusals sufficiently motivated for demand for applicants? Not at all. We need to know that IRCC or the embassy sends a form with boxes that are checked. So there's nothing personalized in it. They send a check mark or a list where they check factors that apply or don't apply, and there are no detailed criteria that people receive directly. It's not a grocery list of reasons for refusal. And if these people submit an access to information request, they will not necessarily receive, they will perhaps receive 1 or 2 lines at most of analysis of the refusal of their visa. But once again, it's very minimal for the time and energy and effort that is invested by these people. Could that be a recommendation that refusals be based on more grounds? That would be needed, especially since the Supreme Court last year in December ruled in the Val-Villeneuve ruling that the analysis of officers must be able to be followed. And increasingly, we hear about files that are going up to the federal court and that are thrown out by judges because the reasoning, the analysis is not sufficient or does not hold water. And so, yes, we need more, both for the public system and for the courts, to have decisions that have more grounds. And I think that people would have a better sense of justice if they knew why their cases were rejected, and that's not the case now. Okay, and that brings me to another question on the criteria that the government has just announced for the analysis of visa requests in the context of applicants and sponsorship. We see, for example, that we need to take in ties at the country of origin, the fact that there is a request for sponsorship, but we don't have any additional details on how these criteria will be analyzed, how they will play in the balance. How would you improve this visa for applicants? Is there a benefit to having more details on the way that these criteria will be analyzed? I will respond with your permission. It's always difficult to prove the intention of an applicant when they wish to come to Canada, and in this case, if there's no procedure or clear policy given to immigration officers, we fear that we come back to the old way of doing things, to refuse visa applicants that are submitted by people who are seeking permanent residency. It's nearly impossible, for example, for an asylum seeker to have their family come visit them in Canada when obviously they can't return to their country of origin during the duration of their application for permanent residency. I've never seen an asylum seeker who was able to see their children when their application was being studied, and it can take years. So unless the officer either has a positive impression of the applicant, we tell them, for example, that unless there is an obstacle or an assumption that there is a problem of inadmissibility, we think that there should be their application should be viewed positively. Do you think that we should change the burden of proof for applicants? Yes, that would be an excellent idea, because currently our experience has not been very positive with immigration officers when the criteria are welcome, but they are still very vague, and the intention of the applicant will always be assessed in the same way, which is to refuse them, because it's very difficult to demonstrate double intent. So if we reverse the burden of proof, people who say they want to I did not respect the conditions for sponsorship. Does that play into the favor of an easier granting of visas for those who've requested sponsorship? Yes, of course. When we have a sponsorship request, you need to show that it is in good faith. So it would be much easier to allow the person to come to Canada with their Canadian spouse to see if they like the weather, how things work in Canada, and to look at their job prospects, about education, and to see whether their relationship can work in a Canadian context. So Mr. Sharma was talking about the fiancé visa, which no longer exists, but it was a good way, I thought, for applicants to come to Canada while waiting for their permanent residency application, and they would not learn.
We will have to move to the next person. Now we have Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their presentation. I'd like to just pick up on this threat. First off, on the issue around a special temporary residence visa for those with sponsorship applications or sponsorship applications in place. Do you think if the government should in fact bring in a special visa in this context, similar to that of a grandparents super visa, if you will, so that people can get an extended stay while they wait for their application to be processed? If I can go to first Mr. Waldman on this question.
Yes, absolutely. I think that would be a very positive step, because what the super visa for grandparents has done is that it's made it much easier for parents and grandparents to be issued visas, because the government's made it clear that that's the expectation. And I don't see any reason why a similar type of visa could not be issued in the case of spouses. Because right now, given the delays in processing due to the COVID pandemic, people are at risk of being separated from their spouses for years, and this is completely unacceptable. And short of making a very clear instruction, which could be done through precisely a special type of visa for spouses, the risk will always be there that any spouse who applies for a visa, notwithstanding the instructions, the discretion of the officer will be such that they won't get it. And that's not acceptable. People need the emotional support of their spouses in times of COVID. And we see too many foreign nationals who in Canada who are suffering from being separated from their loved ones, and that has to be remedied.
Thank you. Same question for Mr. Sharma.
I would agree, but only for where there's a sponsorship application. So only where you have a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen that's seeking to bring their spouse to Canada. I would not extend that special visa, for example, to the spouses of students or individuals here on a temporary foreign work permit. There's Australia and New Zealand went through this issue about eyelets brides as well. So I would concur with Mr. Waldman. For PR and Canadian citizen sponsors only.
Thank you. And same question for Ms. Valos.
Oui, alors.
Yes, we agree with Mr. Waldman. And I think we also need to broaden it to say that it's not just Canadian citizens or PRs who can ask for family reunification. As I mentioned earlier, there are refugees who are accepted who also ask for family reunification. It's not a sponsorship as such, but it is a family classification. And also people who are permanent residents, but on the basis of a humanitarian application. Those people have been waiting were waiting a very long time before they could sponsor their families. And it's extremely important that they can be reunited with them, at least temporarily, until they obtain permanent residency.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to the issue around dual intent and 179B. It's true that on the government website, there's a new posting basically outlining dual intent and what it means. Really, that's how I see it. I don't see it as a directive in any way, shape, or form. And so therefore, the IRCC officials or agents will still be very much subject to their interpretation and discretion. And so if we know that due intent is meant to allow for people to come and visit while the application is being processed, would it not make sense really for those applications for the government to suspend the use of 179B for spousal sponsorship? So Mr. Waldman, I wonder if I can get your thoughts on this.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it seems to me that we need to do everything we can to facilitate reunification of spouses in Canada. And notwithstanding the direction, there still will be a discretion. And, I've seen the discretion exercised in very different ways by different officers. Some are very generous, some could have a more strict interpretation. And obviously that will result in spouses being separated from the family members, which is not acceptable at any time. But during a time of COVID where people need the emotional support because we're so isolated, it's really completely unacceptable. So I would agree with you that the memo was a good first step, but it's not enough, and we need to suspend the notion of suspend any barriers to allowing spouses to be reunified with their Canadian permanent residents or citizens or refugees who are in Canada.
Ms. Veloz, same question.
Yes. Well, I do. Excusez-moi, je parle en français.
Sorry, I'll speak in French. I agree with Mr. Waldman. The issue of intent could be clarified in the policies. The interpreter regrets that the sound quality does not allow for interpretation.
Sorry for interrupting. So there's some interpretation issue. I've stopped the clock. So Ms. Kwan, you have 30 seconds left after that, but let me just get this checked. Mr. Clerk, if you can check if the interpretation is okay.
Madam Chair, I'm looking into it now. It might have been an internet freeze in the connection, but please proceed.
Okay, I'll reset. So Ms. Kwan, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Ms. Veloz. I think the answer was yes. I'm going to quickly actually turn to a different topic. For the people that are already here, migrant workers as well as students, there was some talk about a express entry, but the government actually made a provision, the ANGELS program for healthcare workers were applied. Should we not do the same for other migrant workers who are supporting Canadians? Mr. Waldman.
Absolutely.
Quick 5-second thing.
Absolutely. We should expand the program, as I said in my opening remarks, to all persons in Canada. That's the only way we're going to meet our quota in 2021, and it's a humane response.
Thank you, Mr. Waldman. So the time is up. We will now move on to our second round of questioning. And we have Mr. Soraya. Mr. Soraya, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your round of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. They bring a ton of wealth. I can count it about 60 years experience on this table, and I'm looking forward some of their guidance on this immigration file. First, I would like to talk about on the family reunifications. As you know, one of the biggest issue we have in our ridings or the immigration inquiries, immigration issues. I have 2 full-time people working on the immigration files, and still not enough. The one topic I talked about yesterday, somebody came to see me. His parents' application is still due since 2013. Somebody called me last night from BC. Spousal wife application standing for 4 years. 4 years. Somebody called me earlier this morning. He talked about spousal applications sent in March 18th, 2020. Didn't hear back. Is there anything all the witnesses or any witnesses They can guide us. What can be done? What should be done? This country is, when I came back in the 70s, it was a compassionate, wonderful country. What happened to us? What do we need to do to be the old Canada, the Canadian beautiful country what we have? And I have another question for the students. I'm hoping I get another minute and a half to get asked for the second question. Thank you. Anybody can take it, starting from Mr. Waldman to Mr. Sharma or anybody else.
Well, I understand your concerns, and we see that there are lots of very significant delays in processing of applications. And that situation has only been exacerbated by what's happening with COVID. So, I mean, people have talked for years about the need for some kind of ombudsperson to be able to take complaints and respond, because really when someone comes to me and they've got a delay, all I can do is write a letter and it goes into a black box somewhere, and we don't know who's going to respond and if there's going to be a response. And then the only other option is going to the court, which is, as one of the previous witnesses said, it's like a hammer to solve a problem. So I think the government needs to consider the possibility of creating some kind of ombudspersons who could receive complaints when there are these unreasonable delays in processing of applications, and ensure that there's a quick response. So it doesn't only fall members of parliament to be doing that work, which is what basically what happens is I send my clients to you because you're the best way to get a response.
If I can say, the COVID started back this March, but I'm talking about the applications that are due for 2013, 2012. Oh. If you see it, two people working full time. By the way, for the 2013 application, I checked with the ministry over and over. I get the same recycled answer. Mr. Sharma, you want to add something up to, please?
I agree with Mr. Waldman that perhaps an ombudsman is what's required. I don't think MP resources should be utilized to do status checks. In terms of what Mr. Waldman was referring to in terms of the court, that's called a mandamus application, and our office probably files about 50 or more mandamus applications per year, which again is a very, very harsh, use and disproportionate use of court times to just move a file along. I mean, these individuals have paid their fees. They've put in a complete application. They deserve an answer on their application. And so again, I don't think mandamus is appropriate. I don't think MP office sending inquiries is appropriate. There has to be a third way.
Somebody want to add up from Montreal, from Quebec City, if they have anything to add on to it?
Yes, thank you. We used to have terrible delays, and it got to be better on the outland sphere. We had 12 months inland, and it was a big difference between where the file was filed, different from Paris or from India. We used to have double delays depending on the offices, and now we got more towards a flash or 12 months for all offices, but now we're going to 16 and 17 months for some files. So of course this has all been exacerbated, and this is only for the family class. In Quebec, we speak about almost 3 years or 2 years and a half to process an economic class application. So it's more and more time that it's taking. It's more and more difficult for families. Thanks.
So another question, something for you, especially those students get approved, get selected by the university, schools, or whatever. They got selected, they pay the fees. They buy the airline ticket. When they get rejected by the IRCC immigration department, whoever does reject them, I get tons of these calls in the last couple of years. Is there anything you or any one of you can suggest to the government if somebody is selected by the
Mr. Soraya,
school?
your time is up.
Oh boy.
You already reached 5 minutes, so maybe next time. Now we will have to move to our next person. So we will have Ms. Martinez Ferrada. Ms. Martinez Ferrada, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. And just want you to let all the members know and the witnesses, please direct the questions through the chair. So thank you. Ms. Martinez Ferrada.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you to all the witnesses who have joined us today. As you know, well, you yourself talked about it in your testimony, the pandemic has resulted in a number of significant operational interruptions in offices around the world, and today still some offices are not opened or are not at full capacity. and we continue to work to ensure that we can resettle refugees safely with the OMS. We also made changes at the border. And we worked with the IRCC to restore in-person hearings and also have virtual hearings. We also made changes. You said that there's a lot of changes in some of your files. I wanted to have your opinion on, do you think these changes are useful? I imagine you'll say yes, but beyond that, are there changes that, in your opinion, we should consider as permanent changes to the process? And what other adaptations to this system should we undertake? And my question is both to Mr. Clich-Rivard and Mr. Waldman and Mr. Sharma. So perhaps each of you could respond quickly. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, very good things about biometrics. And then there's workers within Canada and asylum seekers. It takes 6 months to get a response. Whether we're waiting for the end of the pandemic to find out whether asylum seekers will be renewed, it's difficult to understand. And the businesses have a hard time understanding too, so they sometimes lose their jobs. There's something that is something that needs to be prioritized. That's my main issue in the moment. Thank you.
So if I understood your question, I think we can focus on some of the positive things. I mean, as Mr. Sharma and I both said in our opening remarks, there's been a major move forward in digitalization, and I think that's extremely positive. And I think that the more that we move forward with that, the better it will be. So I would encourage the government to do as Mr. Sharma said, digitalize the entire process. There's other innovations. For example, they're landing people without interviews now. I mean, things that were obvious that they didn't do because they felt there was a need to see each person in person, but now they've done away with that. So I think the government needs to look at all the different steps in the process and determine what needs to be done and eliminate those steps in the process that don't need to be done in person and can be done through emails or through digital processes. And that will make the system much more efficient and will benefit everybody, and most importantly, benefit the clients who suffer from the delays because when processes have to be done in person or through interviews.
From my point of view, I agree with Mr. Waldman in terms of innovations such as landing via email. Don't need to do that in person. Let's continue that. In terms of refugee notification eligibility, let's have this whoever issues eligibility to issue the work permit. There's no reason why refugee claimants should be waiting months and months and months to get a work permit out of an inland office. Number two is anyone that's here, like these postgrad work permit holders, we are prejudicing their applications for permanent residence under the provincial nominee program because they don't have their status document. And my own receptionist applied in June for a postgrad work permit. And we still don't have it. So we must prioritize individuals that are already here. This implied status is wreaking havoc on their lives and their access to healthcare coverage. And
30 seconds left.
And again, common sense, issue the work permit at when there's a determination of eligibility for the refugee claimant inside Canada.
Ms. Martinez-Freda, you have a
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, how much time do I have left?
La semaine dernière, le ministre.
Last week, Minister Mendicino tabled a report. 63,000 people with temporary visas had access to PR, which is a historic level. I would like.
I'm sorry.
Sorry for interrupting, but your time is up. We will now move to Ms. Normandine. Ms. Normandine, you have 2.5 minutes for your round of questioning. Ms. Normandine.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back to something that was raised at the beginning, also the issue of international students, because that's also the subject of our study. When I hear the numbers, I've been told that for files that were refused, they were accepted by Quebec at 100%, but in some cases refused by the federal government at 77% for some countries. Is it fair to say that the federal government is harming the desire of Quebec to have a qualified workforce that is trained here? I would like to hear your thoughts on that and a few comments. Thank you for the question. They're not talking about the same thing. It's not exact at 100% exact, but we see that some 10% of visas go to Quebec when Quebec has 25% of the population. That's an issue. For asking for a federal study permit, you need to have a CAQ. So you must have Quebec's approval. So if Quebec has said yes, probably without Ottawa accepting them fully, there's definitely more. That brings me to another question. What could be established by the federal government to ensure that Quebec applications Quebec can keep these applicants, because Ottawa doesn't issue the permits but Quebec wants to keep them. So what could the federal government do to better align with what Quebec wishes to do for international students? Well, there's the dual intent. There's a dual intent for studies and permanent residency. Quebec has selection programs for these local students. So the Quebec Experience program, if we accept that someone receives their education from Quebec, they may wish to become a permanent resident in the same way that we change the approach for foreign workers and students to allow them to move forward and to say that they have a desire to establish themselves permanently here. I don't have a lot of time left, but I'm taking a chance. Should we facilitate the obtention of work permits for those who are here on a study permit, particularly in the case of the pandemic where people can't necessarily go back to school? During COVID, IRCC reduce the maximum number of 20 hours a week during studies. That's something to review. There are foreign students who need to work a bit more. I think that when studies are the principal
For interrupting, Mr. Clichet-Levoit, the time is up. We will have to move to our next person. So next we have Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you have 2.5 minutes for your round of questioning. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Wallman the question relating to the parents-grandparents sponsorship program. The government has reverted back to a lottery system after 10 months of people waiting. And so from that perspective, many people are impacted, and already, as it were, the processing is going to be delayed. I wonder whether or not the government should change the program entirely and just simply allow for people to apply for parents, grandparents sponsorship and to process them according to the order in which they come in, instead of putting in a quota the way in which it is being done right now.
Well, I agree with you that the system has to be changed. I'd have to think about whether the thing the idea you propose would be the best solution, because you have to recall when we had that type of system years ago, the backlogs got to be so huge that people would file their sponsorship and it would take 2 years for them to be processed, and then another 4 or 5 years for the parents' applications to be received, to be processed overseas. So there was the delay just built into the system. So yeah. But there has to be let me just say, there's better ways of doing it. Like Mr. Sharma suggested, there's ways of doing wages lotteries. There's also other things that could be done. I mean, we have to be creative, because the reality is there's more of a demand for parents and grandparents to be sponsored than there are spaces in the system. So there's other options. For example, we could create special types of visas. We could create a special work permit type visa for parents to come to Canada to take care of their grandchildren, that would allow them to get into the healthcare system and allow them to be here but not be permanent residents. I mean, we have to be creative in trying to find solutions that allows us to get our parents and grandparents into Canada, but without it filling the whole immigration quotas. But so I agree with you, as a problem. I don't think what the government did was right. It was disappointing. They should have come up with some more innovative solutions, and hopefully next year they will.
Yeah, or alternatively, they could put more resources into IRCC to process it and set standards in processing, and so that people don't have to wait 5 years, 10 years to actually get their application processed. I want to quickly actually turn to another issue, and these are with the graduate students whose work permit is about to expire now, and
Sorry,
they are.
Ms. Kwan, your time is up. Sorry for interrupting. Now we will move to, we will end the second round. And because of the time constraint, we will have Mr. Hallen and Mr. Dhaliwal for 2.5 minutes each, and then we will end our today's panel. So Mr. Hallen, you are next. You have 2.5 minutes. Floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to keep an open question to each one of the witnesses. Like I said before, we heard from Liberal government that 1.2 million immigrants are supposed to be there. That's their quota to meet over the next 3 years. Given that there's a pandemic and we see processing offices all over the world shut down, like biometrics aren't being able to be done and medicals are delayed. What are each and one of your thoughts on, does this quota seem realistic, or does it just seem out to lunch?
Mr. Hallen, who you are directing the question to? Okay, Mr. Clichet-Levad.
I agree, and I think we have so many workers here that could be regularized. I think if we would expand the pandemic program and des Anges Gardiens, the Guardian Angel program, if we could include more knock on it, if it could be not limited to the health sector and include more people, I think we would get to our targets if we would regularize more people that we already have in here. Thank you.
I agree.
It's an open question to all of you.
I agree with that. It seems obvious the absolutely only way we're going to be able to meet our quota for 2021 is if we look at the resources in Canada, regardless of whether they're in status, out of status. If they're working and they're contributing, we should be encouraging them to apply and facilitating their immigration to Canada.
I would agree with Mr. Waldman and Mr. Clichet-Rivard as well. Low-hanging fruit. They're already here. Processing in Canada is relatively unaffected as opposed to processing in other countries. Prioritize everyone that's here first. I don't know whether the targets can be hit or not. I'm not a policy guy. I'm not within the department, but I think it's certainly possible, and there's certainly great potential to prioritize those individuals that are already our neighbors and already are contributing towards this society.
You have 20 seconds, Mr. Hallen.
Ms. Veloz, your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. For example, the pandemic worker program was not enforced, and we have lots of clients who are just ready to apply for permanent residence on that basis. So we're still waiting for the program to start.
Thank you, Ms. Veloz. Mr. Hallen, your time is up. We will now go to our last person, Mr. Dhaliwal. You have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours, Mr. Dhaliwal. You are on mute, Mr. Dhaliwal.
Yes, Madam Chair, as Mr. Stroher said, that we have a wealth of knowledge on this panel here. I would not be able to explain the mess that Jason Kenney has created over the years that he was an immigration minister, and he's creating now as a premier in Alberta, because I'm getting hundreds of calls from there. But I want to tell you what Liberal government has done. On a parent's category, the wait time were reduced from 72 months to 22 months. For the spousal cases, from 24 months to under 12 months. And also, if we look at this, Madam Chair, 26% of the migration that we got is from the family class. And if we look at the temporary workers, 75,000 temporary workers were given the path to immigration, which comes to 22%. So instead of answering my questions now, I would ask the panel members if they can provide us an input, a tangible input, how we can improve, number one, on the PGP, we talked about weighted draw. What are some of the thoughts Mr. Waldman and Mr. Sharma mentioned that they can put together so we can take it to the into the report? And the second one is clear pathway to permanent residency, because there is also a petition going on now. So on those two issues, I would like to hear from both Mr. Sharma and Mr. Waldman what can be done. And if they can't cover in 2.5 minutes, I would like them to present it in a written form.
Mr. Sharma, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Waldman. Usually I would defer to you, but I think Mr. Waldman and I are in agreement. The way to draw is a very, very simple suggestion, can be easily implemented. A lottery is a lottery, which means that theoretically someone can apply for 5 years or 10 years and never be selected. Mr. Waldman's other suggestion I would have to endorse as well, which is there's different types of visas that we can get creative. Look, we have to balance competing considerations, which is that there's simply not going to be enough seats, let's say, given our numbers, and demand will always exceed resources. That being said, Canada's approach, if you look internationally on the parents and grandparents, better than the UK and better than Australia. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Sharma. Sorry for interrupting. The time is up, and with that, our today's meeting comes to an end. I want to, on behalf of all the members of the committee, I want to thank all the witnesses for your flexibility and understanding that we had to go in for the votes and we had to move this panel. But really appreciate your input as we continue our study. And I would, if you didn't get any opportunity and you want to submit something for the consideration of the committee, like feel free to send in the written submissions and we will take into consideration as we come to the drafting of the report. So I want to thank everyone for being there today. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.